Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 drama. The budget cap saga rages on, with Red Bull now claiming a compliance violation has occurred on Mercedes' side, as in they were leaked the information that Red Bull had breached the cost cap earlier on at the Singapore Grand Prix, and they believe something severe needs to be done about it. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Much to dive into today. Quick mention this weekend, of course, it's a sprint weekend in Interlagos, so only FP1 and FP2. Usually you see FP1 sessions used for the rookies, but instead for Williams, because the qualifying is after FP1, they're going to put Sargent in for FP2. Largely a useless session because at that point, the quali, the sprint, the race setup has already been determined after FP1. So they're going to try and put him in FP2 to give him, I think, 100 kilometers he needs, and then he gets an extra super license point towards his license, where probably he's going to be in Formula 1 next year with Williams, as they have confirmed, unless something goes wrong with the super license, at which point they might get Mick Schumacher, who knows. Let's dive into the Brazilian Grand Prix then. This, of course, is what Interlagos looks like. Great circuit historically for season finales, long back straight, down into turn 4 as well, with another DRS zone, so probably doesn't suit the Mercedes as much as, let's say, it did back in Mexico, due to the drag reduction they got there with the thinner air. Even Toto Wolff admits it on paper, shouldn't be quite as strong a circuit for us as Mexico, so they're probably going to need some help from Red Bull and Max Verstappen if they want to take a victory here. And he's also discussed that next season, well, let's say over the next 12 months, with the 10% reduction in testing time that Red Bull have got for their budget cap breach, that it should help Mercedes catch up in due course. Now, I thought Red Bull honestly would want to move on from this and say, okay, whatever, we kind of admitted we did something wrong, but tried not to really, and whatever, we take the penalty, we move on, and hopefully we don't breach the penalty or the budget cap next season. Red Bull are not backing down here, because we saw just the other day that Horner was effectively demanding an apology from McLaren and Ferrari, these other teams that had, McLaren especially, outright declared that they were cheating. Red Bull weren't happy with that, and they similarly are doubling down on other teams as well. This was a remark that was made a while ago, but now they keep coming out with this stuff again and again. It's strange. A Mercedes employee switched to the FIA, processed these documents for the cost cap at Mercedes, and was then responsible for checking at the FIA. This has been the key argument that's come out of Helmut Marko, and I don't know if there's anyone else really at Red Bull that is saying this stuff, but Helmut Marko just keeps going with this talking point, even though Toto Wolff and others have tried to shut it down. Does he have a point here? Or, is this Red Bull doing this weird thing where, they're trying to say that they're the victims? Maybe he does have a point. We'll see this in a second, despite the fact that they were the ones that breached the cost cap in the first place. But the talking point here is, before this even was confirmed, like after the Japanese Grand Prix is where we got the announcements that, yes, Red Bull had breached the cap by $2.2 million. Aston Martin had breached it by a procedural breach, and therefore had to pay a fine, but weren't actually over the budget cap because they filled in a form wrong or whatever. Now, we heard about these rumours at the Singapore Grand Prix a week or so earlier, and the question was, how are we getting these rumours circulating? Because at that time, the FIA had said nothing. How was it common knowledge in the paddock that this breach had occurred? And that this was the BBC article at the time, whereas you guys can see at the bottom here, Christian Horner, declines and says he's not aware of any breaches, saying it's all speculation. Of course, turned out to kind of be true, but at the time it was Ferrari and Mercedes, so it wasn't Mercedes just, it was both Ferrari and Mercedes were commenting on this and saying it's an open secret that two teams broke the cap, one by a considerable margin. This Ferrari's racing director here says it's now no secret that two teams broke the cap, one by a significant amount, the other less so, which turned to be exactly what it was. So it was both Ferrari and Mercedes about a week and a half before it was actually confirmed, at least a week and a half, at least 10 days or so, they knew what was going on here. Toto Wolff says that's an open secret in the paddock. So the question is, how did this information get out? Because really it shouldn't do, right? This is kind of private auditing done by the FIA's accountants to check whether these teams are in line. How is this stuff leaking out to the teams? Now, as I say, it's not just Mercedes that were saying this, but Mercedes and Ferrari were kind of the two teams that were the top of the bubble. So Helmut Marko's even said Red Bull will now hire new accountants for necessary security against these potential leaks in the future. Of course, they probably need to hire better accountants anyway after the drama from, the budget cap over the last month or so, but this is what he says. In our opinion, this leak that's come about is a definitive implication of a compliance violation, or at the very least, an indication of a compliance violation. The whole thing doesn't make a good impression. We hire accountants to have the necessary security here, and the other thing, effectively what he said was, these were things we didn't have before, only one team knew about them, and of course, he says one team knew about them, but the reality is we're not really sure who found out first, whether it was Mercedes, whether it was Ferrari, whether it was another team, and then it was circulating within the paddock, and Mercedes and Ferrari found out. But the implication is that former Mercedes employee Shayla and Rao went to the FIA, and Mercedes was able to review the documents. In our opinion, there is a compliance violation there. So he is claiming that these documents were leaked to Mercedes effectively by this particular employee that used to work at Mercedes. This has been a discussion earlier this season as well, when the regulations were getting changed with the technical directive, and there were rumours that they'd been told ahead of other teams. Now, this is of course all speculation. We don't know if this is actually the case, and we haven't really seen anyone else at Red Bull say this, but Helmut Marko seems pretty adamant. I mean, the statement is as such. There is definitely some sort of violation here, or at the very least an indication. So he's pretty convinced that Mercedes got leaked this information. Now, is it really wise for Red Bull to double down on this and keep going on this bandwagon just because, you know, every time this is brought up doesn't paint them in a particularly good light? But let's have a look at it, right? I mean, this is probably the first time ever in a TacticalRab video that I've ended up on LinkedIn, but here we go. Shayla and Rao here, so interim FIA Secretary General for Motorsport. You can see what she's up to. And if we look at her experience, right, she was at Mercedes for 3 years, 7 months, kind of special advisor to Toto Wolff, then right after that job went to join the FIA. Now, in fairness, this is not a particularly irregular occurrence. Many other members of the FIA were former members of either Ferrari or Toro Rosso or, you know, other Formula One teams. It's not exactly a rarity that you can go from a team to the FIA, but nonetheless, this has been raising questions because it happened earlier this season, and every single time something happens that Mercedes might know about early, this is going to be the implication. And as I indicated earlier, there was already suspicion earlier this year, back in June, that, Shayla and Rao, former Mercedes and Toto Wolff advisor, who now holds a top position at the FIA, helped Mercedes fast-track the second floor stay for Friday practice in Canada. Yeah, that was the thing back in Canada. They put an extra, stay on their car, and it was a little bit strange because I think they announced that you were allowed to have a second stay on your floor, 1 day before the Grand Prix, and Mercedes miraculously had that extra stay ready to go by Friday practice. And teams were like, hang on a second, how did you know that the rules were going to change? How did you get that part prepared in time? And Mercedes were like, well, we didn't do anything. So I don't know, maybe there was nothing to that, maybe there was, but that's been the rumor, right? Not just for this instance, but also for the technical directive. People were saying, well, Mercedes found out early what was happening here so they could do XYZ. And in a similar instance here, that Mercedes found out about these documents early because it was leaked out. Now, was it leaked from that particular source? Seems to be unlikely. I mean, also, I don't understand what Mercedes benefit from having that leaked to them in this particular instance, right? If Mercedes were to know a week earlier than everyone else, doesn't matter. They're not the ones making the decisions at the end of the day. So not really sure why Helmut Marko's doubling down on this so hard. And again, it's not just Mercedes that were, talking about this. It was also Ferrari and other teams. And apparently the whole paddock knew. So look, this got leaked somewhere, and Helmut Marko and Red Bull are certainly right to say, well, look, how has this been leaked? Who is the mole inside the FIA leaking this information out to the teams and into the paddock? They're not happy about that. Targeting one specific employee that happened to be a former Mercedes worker, even though I'm not sure she's absolutely nailed on, integrated with the auditing process, seems to me like pure speculation. But still, there is a potential point to be had here, right? As Toto Wolff commented on this a few days ago when it was first brought up, and that Helmut Marko's effectively doubled down. He reckoned, look, they're just trying to shift the focus and onto it's being our problem and our, we're cheating, we're, in the violation of compliance, rather than actually it was Red Bull in the first place that were in the violation of the compliance situation that caused all this stuff. So probably there's some interesting points on both sides. Toto Wolff is probably right to say that Helmut Marko is doing this to try and paint Mercedes as the bad guys in this whole saga. And but maybe he still has a point, right? And maybe Toto Wolff is also shifting the focus back onto Red Bull because maybe there's something going on here, right? Of course, we don't really know. But look, if Helmut Marko and Red Bull are going to talk about it, we've at least got to discuss it here on the channel. So definitely enjoy your thoughts on that in the comment section below. A couple of things to mention before we finish out here, because the Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos is this weekend. These are the times around the world here. So 3 hours between Brazilian time in Interlagos, Sao Paulo Grand Prix, right? And what we have in the UK. And of course, slightly further east in Europe as well. Sprint on Saturday, race on Sunday. So yeah, an action-packed weekend. And still the weather as of today on Wednesday indicates the following. This is the Sunday weather as it stands. So quite likely of some decent rain in Sunday's race. Now, Friday and Saturday also say a similar thing. Friday now suggests it might rain slightly less than it was initially forecast to. Saturday still has thunderstorms. So yeah, we don't know what's going to happen here. There's been plenty of entertaining Brazil wet races in the past. Definitely has created some chaotic moments in many World Championship histories. So hopefully we get something similar, because if it's not like that, then it might be a rather processional affair, just because we've got the sprint race, which often does turn into a procession. unless someone happens to get disqualified from the front of the grid and get stuck all the way to the back like happened last year. So yeah, we'll see, but still the forecast indicates a couple of days out that we are going to get rain during the times where the track is active on practically every single day. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.